edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show. My name is Adam Levitan of EstablishTheRun.com. As always, joined by Michael Leone of EstablishTheRun.com as we get set for the second week of the 2025 NFL fantasy football season. Leone, how's it going today?
It's going well. Looking forward to bouncing back after you definitely strong-armed me into talking about Kenneth Walker last week. It was definitely not on of my own accord for sure.
Certainly not. This is a forward-thinking show. On today's show, we're going to talk about hopefully some guys that you're borderline on, some guys that might be sneaky starts. They're on your bench, maybe they're on waivers, but you can conceivably start them this week if you don't have better options. Of course, we are men of the people, as you guys know, and so we will try to answer as many questions from chat as you can, as long as you're a normal human. Don't come in here with any nonsense. If you're a normal human and you ask a legit question, we will try to get to it here at some point over the next 20 to 30 minutes. Let's jump into the list here with our first sneaky start of week 2, Leone, and it is Tyrone Tracy. Now, I know the box score did not look good for Tyrone Tracy in week 1. However, the underlying usage was really strong. I mean, there was worry that he was going to get threatened badly right away by Cam Scatterbo at the goal line and in the pass game. And we didn't really see that come to fruition. And now Tracy gets a really good spot against the Cowboys here. Obviously, the Micah Parsons list Cowboys. I consider the Cowboys defense bottom third, maybe bottom fourth in the entire NFL. So people don't think that Tyrone Tracy is going to be a workhorse because he only scored 5.5 points last week. I think he's going to get at least 70% of the running back touches against the Cowboys here. And so if you do indeed need a start at the running back position here, I think Tracy is a decent bet for 10, 15 points here in half PPR. Leone, any thoughts on the Giants running back spot heading into this Cowboys game?
Yeah, Tracy had a 67% designed rush share week 1. Maybe more importantly, he was running a ton of routes out of the backfield, 58% route share. That was 8th highest among all running backs in week 1. I know we were a little bit worried coming into the season that the rookie Cam Scatterbo could take some of these high value touches. It doesn't look like that's going to happen right away. So now's the time to utilize Tyrone Tracy. And I think there's just a few teams like the Giants who really struggle in week 1. It's going to make the fantasy point performances look terrible. But if you look at, like you said, the actual usage of the players, you assume some regression for the team overall. They're going to be pretty solid starts.
Yeah, and we have 12.3 points for Tyrone Tracy in our projection. One thing that I would say about Tyrone Tracy, just additionally, wide receiver in college, like really good pass catcher. And Russ Wilson, if you zoom out on his career, has been a very high target at the running back position kind of quarterback. So you can see big receiving games, at least in the range of outcomes here for Tyrone Tracy. All right. Let's go to our second sneaky start of the week. It is Keenan Allen at the Raiders. They called him Fat Keenan, Leone. They tried to bury him. They tried to say he was Fat Keenan. He couldn't play anymore. They sent him to Chicago. They bring him back. And now he's almost an every snap player again for the Chargers with Justin Herbert playing at a really high level. And the Chargers were the pass heaviest team out of anyone in the entire NFL in week 1. Now, I'm curious what you think about the stickiness of that, Leone. Will the Chargers actually be among the, say, top 5 teams or top 8 teams in pass rate over expectation this season? And then also, what do you think about Fat Keenan Allen, sustaining here?
I think the Chargers will stay, a pretty pass happy team. I know headed into the week 1, we weren't sure if the pass rate for them after the bye week last year would carry over or not. But people forget after the bye week for Justin Herbert in this first year with Harbaugh, he really got pretty aggressive in terms of pass rate over expectation. Not only were the Chargers really high in pass rate over expectation first week 1, but the team that they play, the Raiders, were third in pass rate over expectation. So both these teams could kind of force each other to throw a little bit more. We could get a sneaky shootout game. Really condensed route share for the Chargers. They've got 2 peripheral, deep shot guys in Trey Harris and Lambert Smith there, but for the most part, it's going to be Ladd, Keenan, Juwan Johnson, and I think that's stickiness. And now's the time to use Keenan early in the season. If you're worried about him wearing down in terms of age, he looked phenomenal week 1, led the team in target share. Great start, especially in full PPR formats.
Yeah, and I know that the Raiders, played good defense against the Patriots in week one, I still think this is a really untalented defense outside of Max Crosby. They have a lot of holes on defense, do the Raiders, outside of that one pass rusher, which is obviously a very important piece. But yeah. All right. Let's get to some chats here before we get back to our list. Stinks says Quentin Johnston or Debo Samuel. Debo, of course, playing the game tonight against the Packers. I was really encouraged by the way Debo was used, by the way Debo looked. I mean, he was breaking tackles. Again, my gut here is Debo over QJ. Leone, what do you think about this one? Debo or QJ?
I think it's Debo. We got some slot snaps from him, which is what we wanted to see. He looked pretty spry out there. So I think that's the move here. As much as we do like this Chargers offense and Quentin Johnston running a bunch of routes, he's probably going to be third in line for targets there. Whereas we actually have Debo right now for a higher target share than Terry McLaurin. I think he's going to get more looks. Less yardage projection than McLaurin because McLaurin's going to get the downfield looks. But in terms of pure opportunities, we have Debo ahead.
All right. Another question from Lewis says Justin Fields or Justin Herbert for this week, a battle of two Justins. Yeah, I mean, obviously Fields looked absolutely incredible in that game. The game environment for Herbert is going to be much better here. Leone, what do you think, Herbert or Justin Fields this week?
I'm going to go with Herbert. It's tough because Fields obviously gives you the incredible rushing component, but all the nice things we talked about this pass rate for the Chargers. We don't think very well of the Raiders defense there. And if you look at just the Vegas team total here, the Chargers have a team total that's 5 points higher than the Jets. And a lot of the quarterback scoring is going to end up being determined by the touchdown production from the quarterback. So I want to see it again from Justin Fields before I take him over a quarterback that has a higher team total where we feel pretty confident they're going to throw the ball, in the top third most in the entire league.
Well, the other thing is when you play the Bills, like you can get behind and you can get behind big. And I'm not sure that's the best setup for Justin Fields, right? Known passing situations is not the best setup for Justin Fields. So I would probably go with Justin Herbert there as well. Salcero wants to know, what are your thoughts on Jordan Mason? So it was more, I thought it would be specific roles. In other words, Jordan Mason would get the pounder work, the inside the tackles work, and Aaron Jones would get more of the pass down work and some of the outside stuff. It turned out there was a lot of drive by drive stuff going on between Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, which I think is actually better for Mason, gives him at least a chance in the pass game here. So we saw Aaron Jones make that big play down the sideline for the touchdown. He also drew a pass interference with a deep ball also. I don't think Jordan Mason gets those, but I still think Jordan Mason was a winner in terms of usage after week one. Leone, any thoughts on Vikings backfield?
Yeah, just completely agree with what you said. The split drives opens up a higher ceiling for him, even if it doesn't make much of a difference in terms of how we project it out of the gate. And we do have both players around 12 full PPR fantasy points this week, but it just opens the door for him if he starts earning, 2/3 of the work. Now he's getting pass work, and we know he's probably going to be the guy that gets the ball by the goal line. Also saw a pretty negative pass rate over expectation for the Vikings. I think that's going to creep up as the season goes on. JJ gets comfortable, but we'll see what happens at home this week if that's truly the case. If it stays pretty low, but they're still going to be successful offensively, that's going to be great for both backs.
All right. Let's get back to our list here of sneaky starts for week two. Player 3 is Cedric Tillman facing the Ravens. I don't know, Leone. Are we sure that Jerry Jeudy's better than Cedric Tillman? Like, are we actually sure that he's better? Because in their last 5 games together, Cedric Tillman has outplayed Jerry Jeudy and outproduced Jerry Jeudy from a fantasy standpoint. So I know Jerry Jeudy was a former first-round pick. I know he has a bigger name. I'm not convinced that Cedric Tillman's not a better player. And I'm not that interested in starting Cedric Tillman if it's Dylan Gabriel or if it's Shadur Sanders. Joe Flacco can still sling it, man. So I'm actually interested in this one. Leone, any thoughts on the Jeudy versus Tillman discussion going on out there?
Yeah, I do think Judy's probably better. I think if you look at some of the stats he put up last year after Tillman got hurt, like you can't just zone in on the splits where they played together. You need to account for out of that split as well. With that said, we already have some more evidence to make it closer than we had before it was going into the season. And the important part is both these guys ran over 90% of the routes for Cleveland. So whether you prefer Judy or Tillman, they're both going to have a lot of fantasy value. Flacco threw the ball 45 times in a game that only totaled 33 points. His line this week on his over-under on his pass attempts is 37 and a half in a projected negative game script against Baltimore. So they're going to chuck it. I like Tillman. I like, buying high on Tillman. I think even someone like David Njoku might go under the radar this week. A lot of attention on Harold Fannin, the rookie there, but Njoku also had a really, really strong route share.
Oh, for sure. All right. Let's go to number four sneaky start of the week. It is Jakobi Meyers, also in that Monday night game here against the Chargers. Geno shredded, man. And I feel like Geno's been underrated for so long as just like a really accurate pocket passer. They made huge plays in week one. And I mean, Jakobi Meyers has just been good for a long time now. So if you have Jakobi Meyers, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's a sell. I think that you want to keep rolling Jakobi Meyers out there on a weekly basis. Leo, any more thoughts on Jakobi and the Raiders pass game?
Jakobi was getting it done last year with worse quarterback play and less aggressive play calling. We've now got an extended sample of Geno Smith under Pete Carroll with these positive pass rates over expectation. We weren't sure if that would hold with the Raiders, and they come out, put up the third highest pass rate over expectation week one. You've also got Brock Bowers maybe dealing with the knee a little bit, which could funnel targets even further to Jakobi Meyers. So yeah, he's a very clear start, especially in full PPR formats. He's going to be one of the leaders in targets week in and week out at this point.
All right. Let's go back to some chats here. Hot Mike says, pick two. I feel like Hot Mike is one of the Bleacher Report producers sneaking in their question here. But Hot Mike says, pick two, Debo, Tedero McMillan, or Devonta Smith. So obviously we need to decide about this here tonight. Leone, obviously the Bryce Young stuff was scary, kind of regressed to where we saw him before he broke out late last year. That was scary to me in week one, but Tedero McMillan's usage was awesome. Same story as always with Devonta Smith. If we can get 30 Jalen Hurts dropbacks, Devonta Smith's going to have a good game. There's a lot of games where Jalen Hurts only drops back 20, 23, 24 times. So what do you think, Leone? Pick two out of Debo, Tedero McMillan, or Devonta Smith?
I'll go with McMillan. I think the high end target share is just makes him a better play than Debo. And then with Devontae Smith, you mentioned we want Philly to be throwing the ball at KC is a good spot for their pass volume to be a bit higher than normal. You also have Dallas Goedert popping up with an injury. Not totally sure if he's going to play or not. If he didn't play, that'd be great for the target potential for Devontae Smith. So I think the upside is in those two players, even though Debo is a pretty safe start.
Agreed. Josh says, do you start scary Terry McLaurin tonight? Yeah, so McLaurin got out targeted bad by Debo Samuel in week one. You could say, well, he missed so much of training camp. That makes sense. I always had some worries on McLaurin that those quick hitting screens and some of those like jet sweep stuff, Debo's going to take up so much of that. It's not great for Terry. Now, they did just obviously pay him a huge bag. He's getting full practice in, even though it's a short week this week. I can't say I feel great about starting him, Leone. It would depend on your other options for me, Josh. But yeah, where are you at on McLaurin heading into tonight's game, Leone?
Yeah, we've got McLaurin for about 10 half PPR fantasy points, which makes him like an okay start. But, we've got the rookie Emeka Egbuka projecting for more than him, Chris Olave, Jerry Jeudy in Cleveland. So it really depends what's on your bench. But yeah, at this point, we're being a little bit conservative with Scary Terry until we see it, given the holdout, given the usage for Debo Samuel in front of him.
Our French says Keenan Allen or DeAndre Swift this week. We already talked about Keenan Allen. DeAndre Swift's usage was awesome in week one. We'll see on Roshan Johnson, though. And they're talking about getting Kyle Monangai more work. I'm not sure that I love Debo in like this pounder role they're trying to use him in. Like, I don't think he's going to have a lot of success doing this. So this is an interesting one, Leone. What do you think, Keenan Allen or DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, they've talked about, Swift maybe needing some time to learn this system. He's always been more of a boomer bust type running back. So to your point, that's not necessarily the back you want to hand over to time and time again. I do think that the Bears offense gets a little bit more on track against the Detroit defense in a dome game this week. With that said, you got to go Keenan Allen unless it's like a standard league. Even if it's half PPR or full PPR, Keenan running all those routes from one of the better quarterbacks in the league. We've hit on how aggressive they've been throwing the ball, that's your pick.
All right. Last chat for now from Jay is Austin Eckler, Khalil Shakir, or Tillman at flex standard league. Standard, Leone. I didn't know people still played in standard leagues. For anyone who doesn't know what this means, standard league means you don't get any points or reception. So you're getting touchdowns is basically all that matters. Yeah, yards are great, but touchdowns are going to be a huge percent of your score. And so what Jay is effectively asking here is who's the best bet for touchdowns out of Eckler, Shakir, or Tillman? This is a tough one, Leonie. I can't say that I play any or much standard. What do you think here?
Yeah, I'm surprisingly in a couple of standard leagues for decent stakes, but the we have these players projecting very close, which kind of happens in standard when you take away some of the volume and whatnot. I think I'd go with Tillman, who we talked about. If he is as good as Jerry Jeudy, then we're under projecting him, and we still have him projecting with these three players. And I do like him having the most big play potential of that group. Shakir and Eckler are more PPR guys where they're going to get some volume, but it's not the most exciting volume. It's usually not the bigger plays.
All right, let's get back to our list here of sneaky starts for week 2. Player 5 is Juwan Johnson. This is a player who I'm sure most of you picked up off of waivers this week if you have him. Now, Juwan Johnson's been someone that we've been intrigued by for a long time because he is a pure pass catcher. It also raised my eyebrows this summer when the Saints gave him a big extension for like legit money. So they like Juwan Johnson also. And then my eyebrows were raised even further when Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau were both out. And so I did not expect this because I didn't think Juwan Johnson was good enough, to get 8 catches for 76 yards consistently. And this is a much tougher spot, home against the 49ers here than you had last week, home against the Cardinals. But yeah, I think you can still, in a pinch, start Juwan Johnson here. Leone, what do you think about him versus some of the, dusty veteran tight ends that are out there, like, I don't know, Dalton Kincaid, or if Dallas Goedert goes, or Jake Ferguson? What do you think about Juwan Johnson versus those guys?
First of all, how dare you throw Dalton Kincaid into this? The
Dude,
first dusty vet you could think of was Dalton Kincaid.
yes, dusty.
Uh,
8% target share last week for your boy, Dalton Kincaid.
yeah, how many fantasy points though? Okay. Yeah, Jawan though ran the fourth most routes of any tight end, or sorry, the fourth highest route share. He ran even more routes because New Orleans was trailing and they had to throw the ball a bunch, which is going to be a common theme for them as big dogs again this week. Fourth highest target share. And he did that with a pretty strong ADAT too, of 8.1. A lot of the other players in front of him that were kind of getting spam targets to the tight end position were lower ADAT. So it's definitely intriguing to me, but I'm still a little bit worried that, the target share is going to fall. We're going to see more Olave and Shaheed. It's not, the tight end position too. You really do want that touchdown upside. So he still falls behind like a Jake Ferguson, Kincaid type for me right now, but keeping an eye on it for sure.
Okay. On our sixth and final sneaky start, maybe not so sneaky. People they're going to accuse us of not being sneaky enough here, Leone. I could have gone with Trey Benson. I thought that would have been too sneaky. But if you're in like a 14-man league and you need a start, I think Trey Benson is interesting. But for people in normal leagues, 10-team, 12-team, James Conner is for sure a strong start here this week. I don't know, man. I thought the Panthers' rush defense last year was one of the worst in NFL history. I was like, they have to address this. They cannot be this bad again. And then they come out in week 1 and their rush defense gets torched by Travis Etienne. And so at this point, I'm just closing my eyes. If you are playing Carolina, I am playing you as a running back. Obviously, that goes for James Conner. Maybe in a deep league, that goes for Trey Benson. Also, here, is it possible this is the worst rush defense, Leone, the Panthers is in the history of the NFL?
I don't know if in the history of the NFL, but the the offense doesn't do the rush defense any favors either there in Carolina. They're kind of constantly in bad positions, which is increasing the fantasy point potential for the opposition consistently. We saw Arizona go to only using 2 backs week 1, which is a really positive sign, I think, for Trey Benson. It's also good for Connor, so I'm not like too worried about Connor, even though Benson mixed in more. He's also going to be the red zone guy. He scored on like a red zone shuffle pass. He also got another goal line carry. In terms of expected fantasy points last week, he was top 10 among all running backs. So his role was still quite strong from a fantasy perspective, even with Trey Benson picking up a little bit more work. And again, they just cut out a third back completely there. Amari DeMercado in the past had played some pass down stuff and got some random carries. So, yeah, I'm really excited to start James Conner. On some of the snake draft sites for week in and week out, he's going like way too late. Is something that I noticed. So I do think it qualifies as a sneaky start, even though, he was drafted in the top 5 or 6 rounds in most leagues.
All right. Got time for a few questions here before we get out of here for today. Frank the Tank asks, do you think Matthew Golden gets more targets tonight? So week one usage for Matthew Golden, considering I thought Jaden Reed was banged up. Dontayvion Wicks came into the game banged up, and Golden had such a strong offseason. I thought the usage was a little underwhelming for Matthew Golden in week one. On a short week, I'd be surprised if that changes. So, if Jordan Love throws more, yes, Matthew Golden will perform better and get more targets tonight. But I don't think he's going to start running, like 80% of the routes here tonight. Leonie, what do you think about Golden as a start?
Yeah, we have him for 4.5 targets. If you're curious on what that looks like, Green Bay should have to throw more tonight after dominating kind of that game against Detroit, but they didn't run very many offensive plays. So it was a really weird outcome for them, and it was deflating the pass volume quite a bit. So there's more upside for Golden just in terms of team pass volume, but I'm with you. I don't know if the role expands right away. Certainly someone that I would be holding on to and not dropping because I think the season long upside is really high for Matthew Golden, but he may be a bench player for you for the next week or two until we see a bit more growth in the role.
McD says Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Keon Coleman, and Jakobi Meyers. I need to start two. So I think you're definitely starting Jakobi Meyers. So then out of these three, Leone, McLaurin, Ridley, and Keon Coleman, your boy, we need one out of them. Um, the way that it ran out for Keon Coleman and the Bills pass game last week was absolutely insane. Like, don't to the point that we were making before, the non-nerd explainer of that would be Dalton Kincaid didn't really get that many targets. It was just that Josh Allen had to throw it a bazillion times, including setting an NFL record for most passing yards in the fourth quarter. So I think a lot of people are going to say Keon Coleman here off of last week. Leonie, what do you think? Need one out of McLaurin, Ridley, or Keon?
So I want to be a homer, and I do think Keon Coleman has some season-long upside. We saw it week one. Obviously Allen had to throw the ball a whole bunch, but Keon also kind of emerged as his go-to wide receiver there in the second half, and I think he has the potential to lead this team in target share. With all that said, Calvin Ridley put up a 29% target share for a Tennessee team that probably has to throw a little bit more than Buffalo. The talent level is in favor of Calvin Ridley here, so that's where I would go. It was a really, really tough spot for Ridley in the opener against, Surtain and that Broncos defense, and on the road, Mile High, Cam Ward's first ever start. I wouldn't take away too much from that and get too negative on Ridley in the Tennessee passing game. Give him another week, and Ridley's your second start here.
JTH9 says Isaiah Pacheco or Brees Hall. Given how much Kareem Hunt played last week and this Eagles front, which is going to have Jalen Carter back, I think it's a pretty easy one here to go with Brees Hall. Any disagreement there? Leone, Brees Hall over Pacheco?
Nope, Brees Hall, easy over Pacheco for me right now.
Justin Brewer says Ramondre Stevenson or Cedric Tillman for a flex. I think that the Patriots have to get Travion Henderson more touches right away. Like, if people are trying to sell Travion Henderson, I would be buying right now. I think he's going to continue to take work from Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre did play a lot in week one, though. Leone, what do you think about this one? Fat Mondre or Cedric Tillman?
I think I'm gonna go with Tillman. New England had a really high pass rate over expectation, which is, one way to get Travion Henderson the ball a bit more is in the passing game and not have to lean on Ramondre Stevenson, who might have a lot of low value touches. So I'll go with Tillman and hopes the team pass volume is really high here for Cleveland this week.
Last question we're going to do today comes from M. Mackey, or maybe MK23, says Omari and Hampton start or sit this week. Well, listen, man. I mean, I understand Omari and Hampton didn't put it in the box score, but usage was awesome. Even if Najee plays more this week, it's such a better matchup here against the Raiders. So I'm happily starting Omari and Hampton here this week. Do you have any long-term concern, though, Leone, about Najee coming back? And the tape bros, if you listen to the tape bros, and by tape bros, I mean guys who sit around and watch hip swivel all day of how these players play, they did not like Amari and Hampton's week one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid run defense against Kansas City. I wouldn't overthink this. This was one of the best running back prospects in this year's class, probably number two behind Genti, and that's the way it was drafted. Wouldn't panic over one game in a tough spot. So I would go back to the well with Amari and Hampton. And long term, I think Najee is going to play obviously more than he did week one, but it might take a couple weeks still for him to get up to speed. And they're thin there. They only had Najee and Haskins behind Hampton, and they're not going to play Haskins much. So I'm pretty bullish on Amarian Hampton still.
All right. Let's go over our sneaky starts list once again here. We had Tyrone Tracy, pass catcher against the Dolphins with a bunch of base work also. Keenan Allen, the elder statesman coming back to Los Angeles, not missing a beat with Justin Herbert. Cedric Tillman, Joe Flacco's going to throw it a ton, and I'm not convinced that he's any worse than Jerry Jeudy. Jakobi Meyers, really good bet, just 7, 8, 9 targets. Juwan Johnson, pick him up off the wire. It's a tougher spot. They're not implied to score very many points, but they're going to play super fast. And I think you can get away with starting Juwan Johnson here right away. And then James Conner in a shallower league, Trey Benson for a sneaky start in a deeper league facing the historically bad Panthers rush defense. Good luck to everybody out there in week 2. Take no prisoners. If you are serious, perhaps too serious about your fantasy football, you can head to establishthorun.com. Check out more stuff from us. Follow us on Twitter at Adam Levitan, at 2hats1mike. Be sure you're following all of the Bleacher Report apps on Twitter too, so you can see when shows like this go live. Appreciate everyone being here and hanging out. For Leone, for everyone behind the scenes at Bleacher Report, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, good luck, everybody.